Good afternoon. My name is Mark Wenzel. I'm the supervisor of the Wildfire Safety Advisory Board branch at Energy Safety. Before the chair starts today's meeting, I'll ask Unique Coleman, an analyst with the board staff, to talk about how to participate in today's meeting.
Thank you, Mark. We welcome public comment during the general public comment period on the agenda, and if desired, after any agenda item. The public may participate and comment in person or remotely by Teams or by phone. Please note that public comment may be limited to 3 minutes per participant. Participants will be called upon. Participants can use the Teams video conference. Participants on the phone may dial *5 when they wish to speak to be placed in a queue by the operator. Please be aware that the Microsoft Teams meeting is recorded. Participants must consent to recording upon joining the meeting to be granted the ability to unmute their microphones. If you do not wish to consent to being recorded, please note your microphone capabilities will remain off during the meeting. Please also note that the chat is disabled. You may send written questions and comments during the meeting to our email address, wsab@energysafety.ca.gov. You may also submit written comments after the meeting to the same email address, wsab@energysafety.ca.gov, or to the docket for this meeting. Instructions for doing so are in the agenda. Written comments we receive will be posted on the docket portion of our website. Relevant materials for today's meeting may be found on our website. The link may be found on the public agenda for today's meeting. Meeting materials are also available in the room. Please feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions regarding meeting materials. For those of you who are present in the room, you may sign in on the sign-in sheet at entry. Please note that signing in is voluntary. Now I'm going to review the emergency protocols for those joining in person. For those attending the meeting in person, in the event of an emergency, attendees will exit the building onto North Market Street. Attendees will then proceed south down North Market Street to the emergency meetup location, which is the parking lot located at the corner of Market Street and Arboretum Drive. Thank you, Mark.
Thank you, Unique. Chair Block, we've completed the housekeeping announcements.
Okay, thank you very much. My name is Jessica Block. I'm chair of this board, and I'll now call this meeting to order. Today is the June 3rd, 2026 meeting for the California Wildfire Safety Advisory Board. To begin, Mark, will you please call the roll?
Board Member Armstrong. Board Member Armstrong here. Board Member Batjer. Chair Block.
Here.
Chair Block here. Board Member Haynes. Board Member Haynes here. Board Member Mader. Here. Board Member Mader here. Vice Chair Porter. Here. Vice Chair Porter here. Board Member Seifert. Chair, the roll call is complete. You have a quorum.
Okay, we'll be passing a microphone around, but I'm wondering if the sound is coming through for all of us if we put the mic in the middle.
Unique, can you tell us if you heard the board members' response to the attendance call?
Yes, I hear them clearly.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
All right, great. Okay, thank you, fellow board members, for being with us today. Also, thank you to our Office of Energy Infrastructure Safety, IT professional Lee Wakun, for being here and keeping our meeting streaming live. Thank you to our supervisor, Mark Wenzel, senior policy advisor, Sean Richards, and Gifford Wong, our analysts, and Unique Coleman for assisting with organizing this meeting. I'd also very much like to thank KIXE staff for giving us the opportunity to use this amazing sound room and for your technical support. Thank you for having us. I'd like to ask my fellow board members if they have any opening statements for the meeting.
Chair Block, just before you go there, we do have Board Member Batjer on the phone. So let me complete the roll call by asking for Board Member Batjer.
Yes, I am here. Thank you, Mark.
Board Member Batjer present. Thank you.
because since I can't see you, for any comments, if I'm, just to make sure I'm covering our bases. Thank you. Okay, not hearing any opening comments. I'll start by reviewing the meeting agenda. We'll start with, we'll hear a presentation from the California Earthquake Authority, CEO Tom Welch on the Senate Bill 254 study report. And then the Risk Model Committee will provide an update on its work in responding to energy safety's request for recommendations. Next, the Publicly Owned Utility Committee will provide an update on its work. And after that, the board will discuss future areas of focus for reviewing WMPs. And then we'll close out our agenda with asking for items for future meetings. First, let's start with the minutes from our last meeting. This is an action item to approve the minutes from March 4th, 2026. Unique, are there any public comments in the room, on Teams, on the phone, or by email?
None in the room that I see.
No comments at this
No
time.
comments at this time.
I'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes for March 4th, 2026, for the meeting as distributed.
Motion approved. Second.
Great. It's moved and seconded that the California Wildfire Safety Advisory Board approve the March 4th, 2026 meeting minutes as presented. Those in favor, well, why don't we take a roll call vote?
Board Member Armstrong.
Aye.
Board Member Armstrong, aye. Board Member Badger.
Yes, aye. Yes, aye.
Board Member Badger, aye. Chair Block.
Aye.
Chair Block, aye. Board Member Haynes.
Aye.
Board Member Haynes, aye. Board Member Mater.
Aye.
Board Member Mater, aye. Vice Chair Porter.
Aye.
Vice Chair Porter, aye. Chair, 6 votes in favor, none against, no abstentions.
Thanks for the vote. The ayes have it. The motion is adopted. The Wildfire Safety Advisory Board approves the March 4th, 2026 meetings as they were presented. Next, the board will report on recent site visits with utilities. Chris, would you please report on the Shasta Lake visit?
Yeah, I will. It was a very interesting visit yesterday in the afternoon. We met with the half of the employees of the Shasta Lake Electric portion of the utility, which is 10 employees, but there were only 5. There are 3 management and 7 field employees. And they laid out a lot of their struggles, dealing with a lot of the federal agencies, 3 in particular, and clearing veg management. They are diligently working at where they can, and I think that that's where they're putting most of their focus. And they have a lot of overgrowth. It's a small. They have a small service territory, 11 square miles. However, extremely dense and volatile fuels, and it's extremely high energy release species there. And with the limited resources and limited manpower, they're focusing on that because for them, it's about safety of the community before anything else. So their focus on grid hardening is probably second on their list. And it is truly because of the community in itself, dealing with private landowners. We saw that in our visit, the difficulty of clearing right-of-ways, creating fire breaks, and creating defensible space for their infrastructure. They have a plan moving forward, although I don't think it was articulated well. I think our visit could have been a little bit longer, and we will revisit them later down the line, and give them the opportunity to give us a little bit more information. But it was for 3 hours a true lesson in the hurdles that a small utility can face with veg management.
Thank you. Can I get any board comments on our visit this morning with the city of Reading?
Well, I have to say that I usually get assigned the northern wildfire mitigation plans to review. And I have reviewed the city of Reading's mitigation plans many years. And I've always been impressed by it's a small utility. There's I learned today there's only 6 engineers on staff. But I have to say from my review, their plans, punch above their weight. They are they're excellent plans with the resources available and the thoroughness in which they have taken on the challenge of attempting to mitigate wildfire risk. And I learned today, I think the meeting, it was great to meet Nick and the director and Nate and others. And to find out about the passion from the experience from the car fire. And I think that's really foundational part of the culture there at Reading Utility. And I told them that I point towards the city of Reading's mitigation plans for utilities that don't have a lot of resources, and as an example of what could be done. So it was a pleasure to be able to meet the people that make that become a reality.
Thank you. I'd like to comment and say that it was a really educationally fruitful visit. I'm particularly impressed with what they're revamping in terms of their approaches to risk management and how they're really focusing on a data-driven approach and a collaborative approach with other POUs. So I'm really eager to see how those relationships grow and those analyses begin to take shape.
If I could, I had the opportunity to be able to participate in the tour of the Reading facilities as well. The thing that struck me was a statement made during the overview, and that is, and I apologize because I didn't write this down verbatim, but Reading Electric is an entity responsible for keeping this community safe from utility-caused wildfires, while also responsible for providing reliable electric service. And that is such a sea change from what it is that has been the customary mission statement that you have for electric utilities, where it's providing safe, reliable, and cost-effective electric service. And underscores, I think, what it is that you see in terms of the focus area that you have with Reading Electric. So I'm really grateful for the opportunity again that has been made available through staff with Reading Electric in order to be able to actually go and visit the utilities, get a firsthand view of what it is that they're prioritizing, and really round out my picture as to what it is that the publicly owned utility community is attempting to do in order to meet its mission to its community that it serves. And so thank you again to Reading Electric, to staff for making these visits possible.
I just want to say, echo what everybody else is saying, but thank you for taking the time out this morning to spend with us and going over your plans. It was very insightful, and I appreciated every minute of it. Thank you.
Yeah, and then Chair Block, conscientious approach through taking lessons learned, putting it through analytics, the wildfire mitigation portfolio approach with 11 chartered programs and mitigating, and bringing that together, but keeping it also local, from historical institutional knowledge to also looking for predictive analytics, contracting that out and partnering, also putting yourself, Reading Electric, a utility, putting themselves in a room with what other POUs would say is outside of their realm, the bigger IOUs, to learn lessons and taking those lessons back and figuring out how you utilize those to help to be successful. And to Board Member Haynes, the way the general manager presented it to us is they're a wildfire mitigation agency, that their side hustle is providing electric power to the community, but their focus is that is focus number one, keeping their community safe and holistically integrating every aspect of the city together and keeping those relationships robust and looking for better ways every single day to serve the community and keeping them safe.
Outstanding. So thanks again to Shasta Lake and City of Reading for hosting us. It really helps us grow as a board, and we always learn so much. So thank you very much. Are there any public comments in the room? Are there Unique? Are there any comments on Teams, on the phone, or by email?
No public comments at this time.
Next, we will, on the agenda, we'll hear a presentation from Tom Welsh, Chief Executive Officer of the California Earthquake Authority, on his presentation on Senate Bill 254 on the study report. Do we have Tom on the line?
You do. I'm here.
Yours. Thank you for being here.
Can you hear? Are you getting any feedback on my voice?
I'm going to mute our mic just in case.
Great. Well, first, Chair Block. I'm going to turn down my speaker so that I can, because I'm getting some feedback on my. Thank you. I think I've solved my problem. I apologize for that. But first, Chair Block, Vice Chair Porter, and members of the committee, thank you very much for giving me an opportunity to talk about the SB 254 study. I appreciate it, and look forward to providing an overview of the work that we did, what's in the study. On this slide, we've outlined just briefly the topics that we'll cover. First, to frame this, why did the study come about? What is the context in which the CEA was asked to undertake the study? How the legislature framed the study topics for us, and then an overview of what we put into the report. And I'll cover those topics, and we'll be happy to answer any questions either during or at the end. On the next slide, the context for the study ultimately starts with the 2017-18 wildfire seasons. The history of the Wildfire Fund and the work that we've done goes back a little bit further than that, but the real context for SB 254 starts with that particularly devastating wildfire season. As I think everyone knows, that season saw the Camp Fire, the North Bay fires in Santa Rosa Coffee Park, and just a bit earlier, the Thomas Fire, Thomas Fire, and other fires a little bit further south. Two things happened in January of 2019. The first was Governor Newsom was sworn into office for his first term as governor, and just a couple days later, PG&E filed for bankruptcy based on the exposure to liabilities from the wildfires in the 2017 and 18 wildfire season. So he took office faced with an immediate crisis. Not only did PG&E file for bankruptcy, but the other large IOUs, San Diego Gas and Electric and Southern California Edison, were facing very draconian rating downgrades all the way to junk bond status. And the consequence of that was that if the state didn't do something, did not act to address the situation that was faced by the large IOUs. Those other two IOUs would have been downgraded likely to junk bond status, creating a non-monetary default on billions of dollars of debt outstanding, and all of that debt could have been called immediately and potentially put the other utilities into bankruptcy along with PG&E as they managed through that situation. So it was a real genuine crisis that the governor faced in the first month of coming into office, and he needed to come up with a solution. And he worked diligently in partnership with the legislature, with the utilities, with stakeholders to create and ultimately pass AB 1054, which did a number of things. It provided some amendments to the energy infrastructure safety environment. It created what is now the Office of Energy Infrastructure Safety. Initially, it was stood up within the CPUC, and then it rolled out and is now an independent office within the Natural Resources Agency. And for us, the implications for CEA is it also created a catastrophe insurance fund, the California Wildfire Fund, which originally was capitalized with about $21 billion worth of claim paying capacity, specifically to insure the large utility companies in the event of a wildfire triggered by their infrastructure. The capitalization of that $21 billion was roughly equally split between shareholders of those utility companies, allocated between them based on a metric that looked at the size of their territory, the risk of their territory, and their historic performance around safety. But $10.5 billion of the capital came from the utility company shareholders, not from ratepayers. The other half of capital support for the Wildfire Fund was created by non-bypassable surcharges on ratepayers collected over a roughly 15-year period of time from 2020 through 2035. And so we're still collecting that, but that's a regulatorily approved surcharge that creates claim paying capacity for the Wildfire Fund. An issue that they faced was the need to create that fund on an urgency basis and find a way to stand it up and stand up the administration very quickly. I think I get a question a lot, which is why in the world is the California Earthquake Authority involved in administration of a wildfire insurance fund? And the answer was simply that the California Earthquake Authority has been managing a catastrophe insurance program for, at that time, about 25 years. We were created after the Northridge earthquake, and so we were managing billions of dollars of assets under management, and we have a complete infrastructure to manage a catastrophe insurance fund. And so the legislature and the governor looked to us to immediately stand up and start administering the fund. And we did that very diligently. We took on board an initial loan from the state of $2 billion, got it reinvested the same day. We replicated our infrastructure to separately administer this fund and to be ready for when utility-caused wildfires occurred. And there were a few that occurred, but in that first almost 7 years of administering the Wildfire Fund, it was a relative period of calm. There was a lot of investment being made by the utility companies in infrastructure safety. The Office of Energy Infrastructure Safety was increasing their activities and their oversight of those investments and the wildfire mitigation plans of the utilities. But there weren't any massive urban conflagrations occurring during that period leading up to January 2025. But January 2025 was, as everyone knows, another sea change moment, certainly for the Wildfire Fund. That wildfire series resulted from a single climate change driven weather event, severe Santa Ana winds blowing across Southern California and igniting in the broader Los Angeles region 14 to 16 different wildfires, two of which evolved into urban conflagrations, the Palisades fire in Pacific Palisades and in areas of Malibu, and then over on the east side, the Eaton fire, which destroyed major portions of Altadena and surrounding communities. That was the fire, the Eaton fire, that was fairly quickly identified as potentially associated with Southern California energy Southern California Edison infrastructure, making it potentially a wildfire, the cost of which would be covered by the wildfire fund. The initial estimates of just insured loss from the Eaton fire were $15.1 billion. When you look at wildfire losses, there are companies, PCS and others, that do initial estimates of what the insured loss is from a catastrophe event like the Eaton fire, and they put out based on data and the fire perimeter and the known property within there that could have been destroyed and also insured. They came out with that estimate, and that estimate has evolved over time, but it's around $16 billion of just insured loss. On top of that is all the uninsured loss that is potentially a liability for Southern California Edison. The magnitude of that fire and the implications for the wildfire fund caused the legislature and the governor again to start to partner on a solution. The wildfire fund was created really to provide some insurance stability, low cost insurance, nonprofit insurance for the utilities to protect them, keep them out of bankruptcy if and when they experienced a utility-linked wildfire. And it was working very well, and the legislature realized that they needed to continue that. And so there was partnership across stakeholders, the legislature and the governor, and they passed SB 254 last summer. Senator Becker, Assemblymember Cotty Petrie Norris were the lead authors of that, but a number of key members of the legislature were also involved in that. So SB 254 did a couple of things of import. One was they created a new future-looking pool of money referred to as the continuation account. It's segregated from the original wildfire fund monies, but it provides claim paying capacity of up to $18 billion for future utility-linked wildfires, and we're in the process of getting ready to administer that. But what the legislature and the governor recognized was that if 21 billion wasn't enough in 2019, 18 billion isn't going to be enough. We have more work to do as policymakers, or the legislature and the governor have more work to do as policymakers to look at more durable and enduring solutions for wildfire catastrophe response and recovery to make the state more resilient. And that's where this study comes in. The study enacted Public Utilities Code Section 719, which lists all of the topics that needed to be studied in order to enable and empower the legislature and the governor to look at broader, more comprehensive ways to address catastrophe resiliency, in particularly utility-caused wildfire resiliency. On the next slide, as you can see on the right, we just put into the report and copied here the full scope of the study that we were asked to look at. It was very broad, and we were given a very short period of time to complete it. We had to complete it by April. We got the assignment basically in October, and then we had the holidays and year-end activities. So it was a broad, very comprehensive set of topics that that we needed to look at, and we built a team out to make sure that we could do that and hit that deadline. The legislature laid out a couple of key objectives. They wanted a study that would deliver options and recommendations to accelerate recovery, responsibly and equitably socialize catastrophe losses across Californians, and of particular import for this committee or this board is mitigating damage. How can we, as a state, look at opportunities to reduce the potential size of the damage caused by wildfires? The governor, immediately after signing the bill into law, issued an executive order that called on a number of his agencies and then asked for support from the Department of Insurance and the CPUC so that we would take a whole of government approach to doing the study and delivering an array of options. And we took that to heart and we adopted a whole of society, whole of California approach to undertaking the research that ultimately became the study. On the next slide, let me just note that some of the, as the legislature framed the study mandate for us, some of them are standalone and focus on a particular sector of California's industry and society. For example, the first was singularly focused on the property insurance market, and it acknowledged that because of wildfire, because of climate change, we have some challenges with accessibility and affordability of property insurance, and we needed to address that. In item 7, it was utility sector focused, and it was asking us to look at the benefits and negative impacts to homeowners and ratepayers of undertaking a series of reforms. And there's a lot in that section, but it ultimately is centered right on utilities. What's interesting about the second one at the bottom, the blended mandates, the way this legislature structured the study was really to call out the fact that many of these topics are interconnected and sometimes in conflict with each other. So as we think about and as they thought about opportunities to equitably socialize risk from natural catastrophes across California, how can we do that in a way that maintains access to property insurance and also access to safe, affordable, and reliable energy in California? At its core, this study, the purpose of the legislature and the governor in framing the study the way they did was to acknowledge that there would be a need to draw stakeholders with potential competing interests that required an assessment of reasonable trade-offs between and among them into this policy discussion. So let me now pivot on the next slide to what's in the report. The first section of the report goes into the background and the context that California faces. And we went back in time and we acknowledged that California and reported on the fact that California has a long record of being able to meet the moment of natural catastrophes. And we recited a series of examples where the state of California and the legislature responded to catastrophes and helped the state recover and be resilient. And with each one of those examples, what you see in the approach is not only do they focus on recovery from the event, whether it was an earthquake, wildfires, or floods, but also take the opportunity to emphasize the importance of investing in risk mitigation. One example real quickly is in the 1989 Loma Prieta earthquake, which destroyed a lot of infrastructure, bridges, elevated freeways in the Bay Area. That was what you'll recall as being the World Series earthquake that happened during a World Series game between the Giants and the A's. And it destroyed a lot of infrastructure. So the state responded not only to help recover, but to go out across the state to inspect and remediate seismically vulnerable infrastructure. That's just one example, and we list a series of examples. So it is not unprecedented what happened in January 2025. There is a playbook, and there's ways to make the state more resilient and recover. What's happening today, though, we also framed in the background and the context the fact that climate change is really outpacing those response capabilities and the investments that we've made in resilience and mitigation. And so we need to face into the fact that the risk today is worse than it was even in 2017 and 18, and it's continuing to get worse. And then, ultimately, we noted that the report was going to highlight important work that has been done, and then what might need to be changed, and where we can enhance it. On the next slide, in the next section, we really wanted to start, since we were presenting this to the legislature, and we were presenting a series of options that fall on a spectrum from smaller initiatives to make incremental progress to the potential to do some really transformational changes. We recognized we had to start first with the notion that across that spectrum, at the most passive end, is a decision to simply not act. And so we included an entire section where we went through all of the sectors, the insurance sector, the utility sector, the interests of wildfire and catastrophe survivors, and the interests of ratepayers, the interests of insurance policyholders. And we took a clear-eyed look at what the implications were and the cost of the legislature deciding to do nothing. And we cataloged those, and there's an entire section that goes through in detail what the potential consequences are of inaction, just to set a baseline. A decision not to act by the legislature is actually a decision, so we wanted to make clear what the cost of that decision was. The high-level summary is the situation is bad, and it's not going to get better through inaction. So to some extent, that was in the report a call to action. On the next slide, we jump into really the meat of the report, which is you jump to one more slide. Thanks, Unique. Is what are our actual options and recommendations? Before I jump into them, I did want to make it clear that all of the study scope made it clear that there were no easy options available. There is no silver bullet or necessarily even a perfect silver thread that runs through all of these that create a clear pathway for the legislature about how to make the hard policy decisions and the public policy trade-offs that need to be made in order to make the state of California more resilient. And also achieve other long-range goals like clean energy goals and carbon reduction goals that are tied up in these issues and were part of the study scope. So there was no simple answer, and there wasn't, I never from the very beginning thought that I somehow or my team had the magic bullet or the ability to deliver that one clear recommendation as to how to go through this. So we adopted an approach which was to reach out to stakeholders, deeply engage across the universe of stakeholders that were called out in the legislation in SB 254, and anyone else that we could think of that could provide meaningful information and input into how to create pathways to solutions. So what ultimately comes out of this section of the report are 3 policy pathways embedded within our 9 strategies, and under those strategies are 28 specific options. And they're not sort of singular options, but they're really our effort to create baselines for public policy trade-offs and discussions about how to achieve progress on resiliency and utility company stability and better access to property insurance in areas that desperately need it. I'm going to spend a little bit more time on Pathway 1, given the charge of your board. On the next slide, we'll jump into Pathway number 1. The first pathway is about trying to come up with strategies and options that will commit to community level wildfire risk reduction. How do we make the problem smaller, reduce the size and economic and social consequence of wildfires. We know that wildfires will happen, but we have an opportunity to meaningfully get out in front of them and try to reduce the size of the damage and the community disruption that happens when wildfire in wildlands move into the built environment and create events like the Camp Fire in Northern California in Paradise, or the Eden Fire, or the Palisades Fire. What we wanted to note in this pathway was that the state of California has done a lot of good work since 2019. In particular, the amount of investments in the type of work that you're doing have been really valuable to start to move the needle. But January 2025 showed us that there was still a lot more work to be done. Vice Chair Porter was making some comments about your site visit, about the importance of local control, and strategy 1.1 was focused and is focused on how to balance the role of the state in providing leadership and resources to help communities undertake the hard work that they need to do at the community and home level to reduce the community exposure to devastating wildfires. The conclusion that we came to, based on feedback from stakeholders, was that a state of California kind of Bigfoot approach, like the state government coming in and trying to provide a single set of solutions that work across all of the exposed communities, was not going to work. Local control and local responsibility, both at the community level and the homeowner level, is really important to do the hard work that needs to be done to make communities more resilient. So our options that are nested in strategy 1.1 are about the appropriate role of the state in providing access to data and coordination so that mitigation efforts can be really targeted to the risk, done efficiently, and are based on well-informed science-based standards about what kind of work is actually going to meaningfully reduce the risk of damage. And just opportunities to streamline administrative processes so that we can speed up the pace at which the mitigation work needs to be done. The second strategy, 1.2, gets to this notion that we have to stimulate community and home level hardening because it ultimately, that responsibility resides with the communities that are in harm's way. And as the climate changes, the size of the wildland urban interface has grown. It's not just a question of us building in the WUI, but the WUI is actually expanding as the climate dries to cover areas that previously were not considered part of the WUI. So those communities, we have to incentivize community level wildfire mitigation planning and then give them access to financial resources and technical support as they develop their own community level wildfire mitigation plans. And then part of this strategy is also to find ways to tighten the link between the investments that are being made in safety and the cost of property insurance. One thing we want to avoid is the notion that investing in wildfire mitigation and home hardening will somehow pay for itself through lower insurance costs. That's not a paradigm that I think works because the risk continues to grow, and as a result of the risk growing, insurance premiums are going to increase. But we do need to create opportunities to tighten that link, even though you're never going to get an amount of premium discount on your property insurance that's going to pay for wildfire hardening and resiliency in your community and at the home level. The importance there is the preservation of those communities as opposed to just cost savings on insurance. And then, increased incentives for cities and counties to do the pre-disaster recovery planning that they need to do. The third strategy is very utility focused, and it acknowledges that a lot of progress has been made since 2019 by the utilities, big and small, in recognizing their risk and managing their risk. But there's still opportunities to make some progress there. The first option was for the legislature to think about adopting a tolerance standard. We can spend a lot of ratepayer money reducing infrastructure risk, but at some point, there will always be risk. Moving energy around the state, moving electricity around the state and gas around the state carries with it a certain amount of risk, and you're never going to get to a zero risk environment, not at a cost that we as ratepayers can afford. So, but there's no standard. There's no standard that allows us to say, okay, enough. That's enough mitigation, and we'll tolerate that residual risk because the cost of eliminating it is too high. The other piece of AB 1054 from 2019 that was helpful was the safety certificate accountability and financial stabilization benefits that come from the Wildfire Fund and the work that the Office of Energy Infrastructure Safety does to certify the wildfire safety plans of the IOUs. That needs to be preserved, whether you keep a wildfire fund or not. And then establishing some safety weighting that is tied to utility company executive compensation, and make sure that each utility company builds a compensation system that is sensitive to the work that they do to keep their infrastructure safe. And the final option there is us drawing on other industries like the airline sector when airline manufacturers identify maybe a design flaw. They can self-report it and make sure that the Transportation Safety Board and other regulators can act on that. So you incentivize openness and disclosure by encouraging utilities, if, for example, they see a risk, let them self-report it and give them some safe harbor protections so that if those risks exist in other infrastructure around the state, they can be addressed. The next pathway is really where a lot of the friction lies. Pathway 2 is on the next slide is framed about how we equitably socialize catastrophe burdens across a variety of different stakeholders, and this is where the legislature, I think, was particularly interested in having us call out strategies and options that would pull disparate interests into the legislature to have reasonable discussions about the policy trade-offs that are required whenever you look at equitably allocating catastrophe burdens and costs. And so the first strategy, I won't dive too deeply into this, but the first strategy really is focused on continuous improvement opportunities around property insurance, reforming the FAIR Plan, solidifying the benefits that we as a state have gotten from Insurance Commissioner Lara's sustainable insurance strategy. There's a lot of great work that the insurance commissioner and his staff have done to stabilize the industry from 2023 forward, when the industry was really looking at departing the state. And so we wanted to not only give credit to the insurance commissioner for that great work, but also look at opportunities to really lock in those benefits and the effectiveness of that work that they've been done. In option 2.1.4, I wanted to call out the notion of underinsurance, because the one thing that catastrophes like the wildfires that we've seen over the last decade reveal is that underinsurance is a chronic problem. People think that they're insured against fire, and they think they have enough money to rebuild their home as it existed before the fire. After a fire, there is what's called surge demand. The cost of rebuilding goes way up. And it reveals that a lot of people are underinsured, and there are a number of systemic insurance industry drivers of that, and some insurers try to provide for that by providing extended recovery costs. But that's a chronic problem that we need to make eye contact with and solve. And then after disasters, there are opportunities to step up supervision of the insurance companies as they perform their, what we refer to in the report as the financial first responders to catastrophes, is the insurance industry. They get out there and they push money into communities for recovery. And yet, you know, we don't pay a lot of attention to the great work and the great claims administration that happens. We and the media tend to pay more attention to that subset of claims where things don't go well for homeowners, for insureds. But there are opportunities to enhance regulatory oversight in that area that we call out in the report. Reforming utility liability is where there is also the potential for friction, but also the potential for really viable solutions based on a good public policy trade-off discussion that can happen in the legislature. There are a lot of interests that come into play. Plaintiffs' attorneys after wildfires are very active in recruiting homeowners who have lost their homes to represent them in a recovery process. Utility-caused wildfires are unique in that the utility company, backed by ratepayer support, is a deep pocket, and that's something that we call out, and we look at opportunities to reduce the outflows ultimately from ratepayers after utilities by making some potential modifications to the liability structure for the utilities after wildfires, and balancing the need for durability and stability, and mitigating impacts on ratepayers. I want to highlight that efficiency with community recovery. As you'll remember, part of our charge was to look at ways to accelerate community recovery after catastrophes. And option 2.3.1, which stands alone within this strategy, is about looking for opportunities to reduce the friction after a utility-caused wildfire and accelerate the money, the delivery of money that survivors need after a utility-caused wildfire. The utilities have tried to stand up their own. This strategy suggests that the legislature will look at the possibility of creating a neutral administrative body that can create programs that will give damaged homeowners and property owners and injured parties an opportunity to pursue a low friction, fast pay process and get money early rather than wait potentially years for a litigation process, a heavily frictioned litigation process to produce their recovery. We have found, and around the world, similar catastrophe organizations have found that communities recover more quickly the sooner they know how much money they have available to rebuild. And so that particular strategy and option focuses on how we can create some kind of pathway like that. And then the next couple slides are really about the creation of a catastrophe fund. One option at the end of this pathway is making the wildfire fund more durable. That was part of our statutory charge. And this slide and the rest of the majority of pathway 3 involve much larger, kind of more transformational approaches to catastrophe insurance in California, particularly around utility-caused wildfires. These graphs, we call these the zones of uncertainty. And the way these work is on the y-axis you have the tens of billions of dollars that are necessary to cover the potential projected loss that would happen from catastrophic wildfires, and on the x-axis across the bottom our duration. So, you know, the longer you go in time, sort of the wider the spread of uncertainty about what the outcomes might be. So what we wanted to do is, as the legislature thought about creating catastrophe funds of one sort or another, in this case, a more durable and permanent wildfire fund to ensure the investor-owned utilities, we have to acknowledge the huge economic requirements on year one, and how that would play out over time and how much uncertainty there would be. And the red line on those graphs are mark the point where if an event happens in that post year 7 timeframe, you know, there may be a need to replenish the fund. We may have another Eaton type fire that wipes out the wildfire fund, and you have to have a mechanism to restore it. And we provided the legislature with some cost estimates of how much it would cost if everybody pays for it. The cost is a little bit higher than if we or is a little bit lower than if we create some of that initial claim paying capacity by tapping into for-profit international reinsurance markets. On the next slide, in pathway 3, this is where we see more of the options that are these larger state interventions in catastrophe recovery. These are the options where, you know, the state governments around the world that are faced with these kinds of catastrophe exposures, like we have in California, have created different types of mechanisms to fill what we refer to as the protection gap that exists. Sometimes private insurance markets, the risk is just too big, too volatile, and the severity can be so high that private markets don't want to insure that risk. So state governments and states can step in and fill that gap by creating protection gap enterprises. And we took a look at some of those. And one of the ones that is probably closer to within the ambit of your responsibilities, strategy 3.2, looks at opportunities to create a funding mechanism for community-based wildfire, so that we have a look for opportunities to structure a funding mechanism that provides funds for the most important work, which is that community and home level mitigation work. On the next slide, some of the modeling we give was really impactful because what it demonstrates is that if we in the state and communities are very risk sensitive and very targeted about where we invest in risk reduction, we can get to a higher level of risk reduction more quickly at a lower price point than if we do what's shown on the red line, which is continue our existing work, which is more randomized and sometimes has more politics in it as to where we invest our money. So these random acts of mitigation, while important, aren't necessarily going to be anywhere near as effective as very targeted risk mitigation initiatives. The cost, though, is high. We have a large inventory of work that needs to be done. And this study ultimately was delivered to the legislature on April 7th so that they can start the process, which they've undertaken already, to bring parties together to start talking about public policy trade-offs to make the state more resilient. And that's the last slide shows you that the ball is now in the legislature's court. To take this and do with it what they will. I testified in a couple of informational hearings in May, and they are eager to look at, digest, and potentially have conversations with stakeholders about adopting some of these options to make us more resilient. And with that, I'll stop and thank you for that went on a little longer than I'm sure you expected, and thank you for indulging me. But I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Tom. That was full of information, and I have some questions, and we'll have more in the future. But I'd like to ask my fellow board members if they have any questions or comments. John.
Chair Block, I did want to, I would love to give more information on the study's findings regarding inverse condemnation. The strict liability pushes responses that aren't necessarily the most efficient. There's doesn't seem to be any institution willing to go forward and said we need to, as a society, talk about the consequences of having inverse condemnation.
This is embedded in our study in option 2.2.1. That is an option to eliminate or reform inverse condemnation. And inverse condemnation simply says that it's a constitutional principle. Article 1, Section 19 of the California Constitution says if the government or someone providing a public service like utilities damages property, they have to pay reasonable and just compensation for the damage to that property. And it's a strict liability regime where it doesn't matter whether or not the utility company was a prudent administrator of their system or not, they still have to pay. And then those costs are socialized through the ratepayer base of that utility. And this is the courts in California applied that governmental constitutional taking concept to utilities because they are providing effectively a service that could have been performed by governmental bodies, as it is with publicly owned utilities that are integrated into city and regional governments. But that is laid out and discussed in the report and is getting some interest, but is controversial because it does have an impact on the pathway for survivors to recover in the event of a utility caused wildfire. And so there's some sensitivity to that.
I understand the sensitivity. I totally understand that, but the result is an extreme risk averse operation of an electrical system that results in the other undesirable effect of the public safety power shutdowns, which it's almost dictates those public safety power shutdowns, and those are also a burden on society.
Indeed, yeah.
Mr. Welch, I'd like to follow on in this line. First off, thanks very much for distilling an extremely complex study so that we can understand the pathways that you have considered and are putting in front of the legislature for them to consider as well. One of the concerns that I've heard raised is that the wildfire liability exposure can affect not only the utilities, but potentially the broader municipal services that community financial stability. Did the study evaluate how catastrophic liability exposure could affect local governments and public services served by the POUs?
Yeah, yes, we did. It's a really good question. And the short answer is yes. As we were looking at the current state, as well as the cost of inaction and the solutions, the inverse condemnation exposure exists not just for investor-owned utilities, but also publicly owned utilities. So if, for example, Palisades had been ignited by infrastructure owned by the LA Department of Water and Power, that liability of that department, which is a department of the city of Los Angeles government, would have flowed straight up to the city and to city taxpayers. So that liability could conceivably have resulted in what's called a Chapter 9 bankruptcy proceeding for local governments. We've had a couple here in California, in Vallejo and in Stockton, when the city became insolvent, they can restructure through a bankruptcy proceeding. And that would have been the likely result. And that is part of the exposure for POUs. They have the same constitutional liability in the event their infrastructure causes fires. And so that liability rolls up ultimately to the taxpayers within the city. So we looked at that and we offered options in pathway 2 that looked not just at utilities that were owned by investors, large and small, but also opportunities to reform and socialize cost when it's a POU that is involved.
Thank you. A related question, I think, is when considering the tolerance standard that you described, did the study give any consideration to the effect that that could have on utility commitment to strong wildfire mitigation?
Great question. And yes, and nested into strategy 1.3 is an effort to tie those together, to acknowledge that a risk tolerance standard would help the utilities and help ratepayers and know how much to invest in chasing risk reduction, and when it's okay to say that's enough, we'll tolerate residual risk. But strategy 1.3.2 and other strategies there really focus on making sure that we don't back away from the progress that we've made around utility company accountability, and making sure that the senior executives within the utility companies are personally invested in that. That's strategy 1.3.3 is making sure that safety is an element, continues to be an element of executive compensation. But your question does call out those important trade-offs.
Well, you've got, you're trying to balance between these pathways that you identified to proceed with. So, yeah, thank you very much. Grateful.
And thank you for the comments. Thank you for the comments on the study.
I'd just like to check in with a board member Batcher, who's virtual, see if she has any comment.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Tom, I want to thank you very much. This is, as you always are, very thorough and concise. And it was quite a lift that you all undertook at the direction of the legislature and the governor's executive order. I guess my concern now, as you end your presentation, is indeed what with this body of information. You can't answer this, I know, but the body of information that you all have presented to the legislature as a statute required, and we are now in June, and yes, there have been 3, maybe 4 informational hearings, and great concern as to what really is happening. I know there are a couple spot bills, but I guess I'm very, as a citizen and a member of this board, very concerned about what can be done and will be done this legislative session. And I guess maybe there would be a question, if appropriate to you, about what if there is not a beginning of a solution statutorily? Because as you've said, as the study said, as was said during 254 discussions, this is just the beginning. We have much to do. But I have great concern if something fairly substantial is not done this legislative session, what the financial markets will do in terms of their investment in California and their continued support, frankly, for our California infrastructure and IOUs. Did your study evaluate what as a state, our environment, our regulatory environment and so forth can withstand if the investor community does not get some, in their opinion, solution to the instability of the wildfire fund?
Thank you for the question, and thank you also for the compliment on the quality of the study. It was a lot of work, and we're proud of the work that we did. We're not an advocate for any of these solutions. We're just the administrator. But to your point, we did specifically want to call attention to, and did call attention to, in the section called the cost of inaction, to the implications of inaction for not only the utilities, if they are downgraded and the cost of capital for their work becomes higher, but what does that do to electricity ratepayers? All of us as ratepayers essentially will bear a heightened cost through even higher utility rates if no action is taken, even if it's incremental action. The markets have illustrated a sensitivity to public policy action, and when the state acts, the ratings stay higher, and the utilities' cost of generating the capital they need to operate and to invest in mitigation is moderated. Inaction causes the cost of capital to increase. All of those additional costs are passed on through the rate system to ratepayers. So we did identify that and call out not only the impact on ratepayers, but we want the utilities to invest in a clean grid, in the achievement, in helping us achieve long-range emission reductions and carbon impacts to start to make a meaningful climate change impact. So those were called out. Most of them are nested in that section called the cost of inaction.
I thank you very much for that answer, and I hope our friends in the legislature read that section carefully.
What was that a question to me, Chair?
In a moment, Tom, but I'm asking just to go back one slide. That's possible.
Yeah. Okay.
Go back one more. There was a place where the alternatives to liability were described. Is it the one just before this one, maybe? But it was, yeah.
It's actually slide 18. 18.
Yes, okay, here we are. Are you capable of briefly describing what some of those options in the bullets for the right-hand scenario, option 2.4.3? Sounds like there must be multiple scenarios in this report describing the opportunities here.
There are. We didn't. What we wanted to do here was to acknowledge that the cost of building an insurance fund, like the wildfire fund, is sensitive to the outflows from the fund. So if you look at option 2.4.1, what is the cost of creating a more durable nonprofit insurance fund like the one that exists now? And how do the models suggest what that will look like over time, how long it will last, and how durable it will be as a claim-paying resource for those events when utilities cause wildfires. On the right, option 2.4.3, if you look at the cost axis, it's lower in part because if you do some liability reform, you and lower the outflows by doing some reasonable trade-off modifications to the utility company's liability, you can reduce the overall long-term costs of creating an insurance fund like this one. And that's what that was designed to do. Not necessarily to say this is exactly, how you should do a liability reform, but what we did was we created sort of a straw man set of caps, which are noted in the first bullet below the heading, which is let's get rid of punitive damage exposure. Let's cap non-economic damages. Other states have capped non-economic damages, emotional distress, pain and suffering, non-property related damage. Look at whether public entity property damage can be limited to diminution in value, eliminating public entity non-property recovery, so added costs associated with recovery that aren't directly tied to property, and then putting some reasonable limitations on paying for alternative living expenses during recovery, and that's really more focused on kind of very high end people who want to be in $20,000 a month rental homes, those kinds of things. So we created just a pro forma, and then we asked the modelers to run that through and create that zone. That let us know what the ratepayer impacts would be if we created a fund and also did some liability reform to reduce the outflows from that fund. So it's illustrative as opposed to a specific recommendation.
For that explanation, also just describing what some of these examples really were meant to describe. One of my concerns about these catastrophic wildfires is that they hurt middle class or below in the citizens, and I think it's turning these neighborhoods from what used to be pretty stable in a middle class status to only upper class status, and when the rebuild occurs. And so it's just something to be considered of when these scenarios get established. We want to be able there to be public services that are available and reasonable compensation, but that sounds like that was clearly described in these scenarios. So thank you for the clarification. And board member Batch has a hand up.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I have a follow-up to that question, and I know this is really stupid of me, but the monthly charge in scenario 2.4.1 as well as 2.4.3, that is paid by the electric and gas utility ratepayers. I mean, in these scenarios?
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, we were trying to illustrate estimates of what it means to ratepayers to undertake the creation of a more durable wildfire fund and a more durable wildfire fund that has some liability reforms in it, so that we could kind of benchmark and give the legislature and ratepayers and survivors and everyone who has an interest in this topic some information about impacts.
And that's paid currently, please correct me, I should know this. That's paid currently by IOU ratepayers and POU ratepayers both?
Well, right now,
50/50?
right now the wildfire fund is investor-owned utilities, and that goes back to what I mentioned as the original capitalization came half from ratepayers, but the other half comes entirely from the stockholders and from the capital account. So that and with POUs back in 2019, there was not a way to easily figure out how that 50% capitalization contribution could be made by a POU. And so the original crisis and the structure was built around investor-owned utilities. But these are examples, not exclusive opportunities. So if the POUs have been represented in the legislature and have asked the legislature to consider the interests of POUs in this type of low-cost catastrophe insurance mechanism.
I thought the general fund also, I thought it was a three-legged stool back in 1054, but with general fund directly. Guess my memory is been.
Yeah, no, it was just ratepayers and the stockholders of the three large.
Yep, remember that well, but I thought general fund was included a small amount. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any more comments from board members? All right, any comments in the room? Are there any comments on Teams, on the phone, or by email?
No public comments at this time.
Shall I proceed to the next agenda item?
Yes, please.
All right, great. All right, thank you so much, Mr. Welsh, for being here. It's a wonderful presentation. We really appreciate it. We hope to be in communication with you about the next steps.
You're very welcome. Thanks for inviting me.
Thank you.
Next on the agenda, Patrick Doherty, Program Manager from Energy Safety's Performance Assessment Division, will present a summary and update on the division's work. Is Patrick here?
I am. Thank you, board, very much. This is going to be a tough act to follow. Tom Welch, you've already gotten the main course, and now you're going to get the hors d'oeuvre, but I'll certainly do my best to hold your attention. I'm going to give you a brief overview of the history of the Performance Assessment Division at Energy Safety, and then give you some insight into what we're currently up to. Next slide, please. So short history, as you probably know, we began as the Compliance Assurance Division within Energy Safety. Before that, we were simply part of the Wildfire Safety Division at the CPUC. The main job at the beginning was to conduct field inspections and also to write up the original annual reports on compliance for the 2020 WMPs of the private electrical corporations. We did issue some notices of violation based on field inspections to Edison. Early on, Edison did challenge some of these NOVs and lost on appeal. And some of you may know that our 2020 PG&E annual report on compliance was the subject of litigation. So that's the early history of the Performance Assessment Division as Compliance Assurance Division. And if we go forward one more slide, I want to talk to you a little bit about the transition. So beginning in early 2024, we had a lot of positions that were made available to us that we could fill, and this substantially revamped our operations. By filling those positions, we were able to increase the tempo of our field inspections substantially, as well as the pace of drafting of the annual reports on compliance. Last year, we successfully published all of our annual reports on compliance by the statutory deadline. This was a significant milestone for us and for energy safety more broadly. In 2024, the environmental scientists that had been working for the Compliance Assurance Division were spun off into their own division so that they could focus specifically on vegetation management issues. As environmental scientists, they obviously have very specialized expertise that's a little bit different than the utility engineers that currently work for me in the Performance Assessment Division. And so I think for very good reasons, they were spun out. And then on January 1st, 2026, we changed our name from the Compliance Assurance Division to the Performance Assessment Division in light of SB 254, which I think all of you are probably aware of. The new law's focus on performance oversight as opposed to compliance now opens up some new avenues for our work that we are currently exploring. Go to the next slide. It continues to be the case that we're very much focused on publishing the annual reports by the statutory deadline. That's obviously very important for energy safety to do. We now call them annual performance reports, however, not annual reports on compliance. They must be issued no later than 18 months after the electrical corporation submits its own self-assessment report to energy safety. We now have a 5-dimensional rubric of performance assessment that we apply in these reports. Obviously, we focus on WMP initiative attainment. It's bread and butter. But we also look at the data governance and consistency issues that we see with the electrical corporations. We analyze their PSPS events, and then we look at their risk and outcome metrics. Risk metrics are things like ignitions, outages, and wires down. And then outcome metrics, as implied, are things like acres burned and structures destroyed. In the future, we think these reports will probably include findings from more of the one-off performance investigations that we're doing. We are expanding into looking at specific areas or specific programs of the electrical corporations and assessing the effectiveness of those. Those are still being developed at this time, so they won't be folded into this year's annual reports, but we are looking at doing that in the future. Okay, go to the next slide, Uni. Field inspections. Now, this is probably my favorite part of the work that I oversee at Performance Assessment Division. I love going out in the field with our inspectors. We do have 9 field inspectors to cover the entire state, all 6 electrical corporations. And when we go out to look at the WMP work of the electrical corporations, we're looking to assess basically their performance. How did they do? Did they actually do the work that they said they did in the given area? We also look for wildfire safety concerns that might be present at a location where we're doing an inspection and aren't necessarily related to the WMP work. But because they raise a wildfire safety concern, we will nonetheless notify the electrical corporation of the concern and give them a heads up that we think they should address it. These wildfire safety concerns, for those of you that are familiar with the Commission's General Order 95, track GO 95 pretty closely. We have 3 categories, and we look at the sort of things that we would look for under that kind of inspection. when we look at wildfire safety concerns. But when it comes to notices of non-performance and notices of data inaccuracy, which are other instruments that we can write, there we're laser focused on the WMP work. So if they report that they say, removed a fuse and replaced a fuse at a given location with a CAL FIRE exempt fuse, we check to make sure that they did that. And if they didn't do it and we don't see a CAL FIRE exempt fuse at that location, then we'll write up either a notice of non-performance or a notice of data inaccuracy. Field inspections are super important for another reason, not just following up on the numbers and the maps. They do form a foundation for the other work that we do. We often get insights into what's occurring in the field that we then want to we want to focus more attention on in the future, depending on what we see. This is, again, an emerging part of our practice, integrating our inspections branch more into our audit branches and policy branches, but it is something we're developing as we speak. Next slide. Here are some statistics on calendar year 2025. Again, with 9 inspectors, we can't cover as much ground as we would like, but we try to cover as much as we can. We did lodge, over 5,000 inspections statewide. We found 89 instances of either non-performance or data inaccuracy, and then almost 600 different wildfire safety concerns that we reported to the utilities. All right, next slide, please. Another important function that the Performance Assessment Division has is overseeing the Independent Evaluator Program. Again, as some of you may know, statute creates this program. It requires Energy Safety to work with the State Fire Marshal and CAL FIRE to establish a list of authorized independent evaluators. Those independent evaluators may then be contracted by the electrical corporation to assess the electrical corporation's performance now in a given performance period in a calendar year. This is a process that's been going on for several years, and it's very important to the Performance Assessment Division that we do this on time as well, because there are statutory deadlines attached to this as well. I won't get into the detail, but the slide has some more on what exactly we do with respect to this program. All right, next slide, Unique. We do have some challenges that we are confronting. I'm very excited to be the program manager of the Performance Assessment Division. I have been for about 2.5 years now, because I get to work on this and I get to help improve how we do things at Energy Safety and hopefully take even more risk off the system than we've already achieved. We're going to continue to look at ongoing issues that we see with the quality and timing of electrical corporation data. Data is boring. Talking about data can be very boring, but it is extremely important. It is the foundation of situational awareness. It's how the utilities know where the risk actually is on their system and how best to address it. So if you don't have that foundation, I personally think it's difficult to do a lot of other things that we want the utilities to do. We want to continue assessing the performance of their work. We would like to compare performance against electrical corporations. We think that's one of the best avenues we have under SB 254, not necessarily shaming an electrical corporation, but rather saying, okay, if electrical corporation A does it one way, B does it another way, and C does it a third way, are there ways in which they can learn from each other? Are there ways they can optimize each other's procedures to deliver the best results for the state and for the ratepayer? And finally, we are, just like a lot of other state departments, developing our own human resources and gaining experience into how to use these tools. Most of the people on my team are very new. As I mentioned, I've been in the job about 2.5 years, and virtually all of my staff have been there less time than me. So we are continuing to develop as a team and grow into our roles. Okay, and I think that might be my last slide, Unique. Yeah, I'm happy to take any questions, and again, appreciate the opportunity to speak to the board today.
Thank you, Patrick. Questions from board members? Member Batcher, please speak if you have any comments.
I do, Madam. Chair, thank you. So could you explain how you in the Performance Assessment Division coordinate, if you do, with the Safety Division at the CPUC?
Sure. We're, I wouldn't say constant contact, but very regular contact with CPUC. We tend to operate at a appropriate staff to staff level, board member Batcher. So for example, I'm in communication with the program managers, both at SED and SPD. We talk frequently about the different issues we're seeing, comparing notes basically. We do have a standing monthly meeting with SPD where not only the Performance Assessment Division, but the other divisions within the Electrical Infrastructure Directorate are liaising with Safety Policy Division and the other people over there that are working on those issues. So we try to stay tight with them. I know above my pay grade, there are people that are engaged with the other people at SBD and SED that are engaged in these issues. And then obviously, as you know, Forrest has come over to be our new director, and I'm very stoked about that. I think that'll be a great way for us to maintain open communication with the CPUC and really make sure that we're learning from each other and sharing information in the most productive way possible.
Yes, I too join you in the excitement of having Forrest Kaiser come to OEIS. I think it's just wonderful. I was just thinking about your proactive inspections in the field, and if there is coordination there, both in where you're going, what you're looking at, and then of course what you're seeing. I don't know that it would be duplicative of things that are done by the safety division, but I was just curious about that.
Yeah, thank you for the question. Our process for planning our inspections is internal, so we do look at the data we get from the utilities, where they claim to have done work, where we have been, where we haven't been, HFTD versus not HFTD. And it's actually quite an involved process that we go to figure out where to go. We don't necessarily coordinate with SPD or SED on that. We do go out in the field, but we certainly do let them know that, like I was just describing to you, in the aggregate, here's what we've been up to. And I would say that I'm aware that this isn't my division. Again, this is the environmental science division. I believe that they were engaged in some sort of learning exercise with either safety enforcement division or possibly safety policy division. Forgive me, board member Batcher, I'm sort of out of my depth now. But I know they did do something joint in the field either earlier this year or late last year. So I know there's some coordination from the environmental scientist side as well.
That's really helpful. Thank you so much. And I didn't mean to put you on the spot to try and describe things that are outside of your purview, but thank you.
It's all good. I recall back in the day, you and I were co-assigned to the AB 1054 proceedings. So this is bringing up lots of good memories for me, board member Batcher.
I only want to give you good memories. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you, board. Are there any, just checking, any more further comments from board members? Okay, any public comments in the room? Do we have Unique? Are there any public comments on Teams, on the phone, or by email?
No public comments at this time.
Thank you. This concludes this portion of the agenda. Patrick, thank you for being with us and for the informative presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you. And we will now take a short 10-minute break. It's 2:32, so we will get back at 2:42. Thank you all. All right. Okay. Welcome back. Next on the agenda, we're going to hear from the Risk Model Committee on its work in the last several months, including a response to Energy Safety's request for recommendations on risk modeling of extreme conditions. And this includes the report that we did, right? And the board will discuss and vote on the adoption of the recommendations. And it just so happens I am the Risk Model Committee, so I'm going to present on that. Next slide, please. So firstly, I was interested in having a robust conversation with the policy division's utility engineers to understand in greater detail what the issues were with respect to challenges in the risk modeling and the enforcement. And so I made a request to meet with them. So, and before I continue, I would like to point out that the risk model committee involves me, Jessica Block, and Dr. Alexander Seifert. Our expertise, mine is in wildfire modeling, hers is in wildfire and fire ecology, and we use our expertise to guide our recommendations to energy safety. So we completed 3 activities this quarter. The one where I spoke to the utility engineers to get greater understanding of some of their challenges. And then we did work on a request for weather extremes with respect to the LA fires. And then we also provided some recommendations on uncertainty recommendations for WMP risk modeling guidelines. Next slide, please. So, yeah, so I made a special request to talk to the utility engineers and the policy division to understand more about how utilities implement risk modeling requirements in practice and how regulatory guidance translates to on-the-ground modeling decisions. And it was a really fruitful conversation. And I bring this up to my fellow board members because it's something we can all do to ask for greater engagement with energy safety. I found it really helpful from a technical point of view. And they guided both recommendations from for the data guidelines as well as the WMP risk modeling guidelines. And our staff, Mark, Sean, and Unique and Giff were able to help with facilitating that conversation and participating. Next slide, please. So we worked on a data recommendations for the WMP risk modeling guidelines as well. So in those recommendations, we highlight our focus on consistency and traceability of the data reporting, stable and consistent identifiers, in particular, maintaining circuit numbering, for instance, across years, as the IOE or any of the utilities report in their WMPs and their data guidelines to make sure that there's a traceability across and consistency across WMP circuit numbers, data requirements, and those circuit numbers and being able to trace over time how things are changing. We also highlight that models are constantly evolving. It's harder to understand the evolution when the results are also shifting because of that meaning. And so we've asked for a crosswalk. So if there is constant evolution in the infrastructure where the circuits get renamed, then we also have asked for a crosswalk to ensure that continuity. Next slide. In conclusion, we also provided recommendations on the uncertainty recommendations, so validation, verification, uncertainty analysis. So how the utilities are performing their risk modeling and their consequence modeling, but how are they validating that these risk simulations are valid? So this builds on some of our previous recommendations that the risk model committee has provided in our guidelines recommendations, and highlights the importance of transparency, rigor, and an honest characterization of the limitations of some of these simulation tools. And so the committee's goal is to ensure that the WMP guidelines require utilities to demonstrate not just that their models produce outputs, but that those outputs are reliable, appropriately validated, and accompanied by honest characterization of their limitations. So these are not just black boxes that are being executed on, and particularly under extreme conditions where validations and buyer behavior are not well understood or validated on these cases. Next slide, please. So, Sean, I'd like to make sure, can you give an overview of the test update?
So since the last board meeting, and Unique, if you could go to the next slide. If you all recall, during the last board meeting, we submitted the recommendations, the request for energy safety recommendations for a 3-week public comment period. And it was just in keeping with the board's commitment to transparency and stakeholder engagement. The committee received one submission from TechnoSilva, a wildfire modeling firm whose platform is used by the California IOUs and other utilities. TechnoSilva raised 4 comments through 2 sets of topics. The committee carefully reviewed each comment. However, no major changes were made to the report's findings or recommendations based on the comments received. The committee's responses to each of the points are documented in section 6 of this new draft version, which is available to all board members and published on the WSAB docket for the public. And following the public comment period, the committee also met with TechnoSilva representatives to discuss the comments directly, and those further informed some of the clarifying edits that were made to the report in the final text. The report, next slide, please. The report makes 4 recommendations directed towards energy safety based on modeling extreme conditions. One is to fully implement the 2025 risk modeling recommendations from the board's 2025 recommendations to energy safety. The second is to exercise caution in basing decisions on absolute values of modeled risk, given the known limitations and uncertainties described in the report. The third is to require utilities to compare risk rankings using both expected values and maximum or tail values so that the influence of extreme scenarios on that circuit ranking can be assessed. The fourth is to require utilities to test and report on alternatives or supplements to wildfire spread models when calculating wildfire consequence. And this is particularly under extreme, realistic extreme scenarios. That I'll pass it back to you, Chair.
So in conclusion, we found coordinating with the energy safety engineers and reviewing some of these, our experience document, as well as our recommendations in 2025, are being processed by energy safety and are being fed into the revised guidelines document. And we're very excited about that. We also have been emphasizing that there's great complexity in the risk and consequence models in the WMPs, and we're eager to help support the transparency of those so that both energy safety and the utilities can grow an understanding of their risk profiles as well as clarity in reporting where they're doing their mitigation with respect to their greatest risk regions and circuits. Next steps for the risk model committee are, we're still figuring out what those next steps should be. We're eager to see how the new WMP guidelines do play out. We're curious about what the data guidelines are going to look like as well. And are eager to see what energy safety's future requests will be to the risk model committee for on IOU risk models. So this committee will continue to provide those updates in future board meetings and topics of interest, and eager to hear how my fellow board members are seeing the report. Before I call on a vote to adopt the report, are there any questions from board members? Board member Lee?
I'm not sure that this is comment, it's an observation. When I was going through the recommendations, I was a little bit tripped up. And it took me time to be able to go and find the 2025 recommendations.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering if there could be a more explicit let me see, link or something to that effect, so that people have quick access to what those recommendations are.
So I agree. There's been this continuity of recommendations over time that feed into the request, the report that is generated by the request. Is that what you're speaking about?
Well, I thought that there was a report in, say, 2025 that that WSAB made and recommended to the office, and then in that that included the series of recommendations that are being referred to in this document.
Yes. And those are also, right, that's the combination of risk model recommendations on top of our other statutory recommendations. So I agree that it's in a way varied, and I can take that as an action item to staff, but I think it's helpful all around for energy safety as well, to see the highlights of those recommendations from 2025 as they pertain to our report from the DW request. I agree.
But other than that, I found the report to be very practical in how it is that it was assessing the utilization of these risk models and the limits that were associated with it. So that would be the feedback I would like.
Thank you. Any comments from other board members?
I did, Chair Block. And in there, when I went through it and looked at it, and it may have been hidden and beyond my comprehension. Were there a primer to help an individual or lead to a more effective risk modeling, I would say algorithm or database?
In our 2025 recommendations, we recommend that the utilities use at least 3 different consequence models, at least one being open source, so that the science is well documented. And with that, we also, I think that's a good suggestion. And I look to our staff for a recommendation on what's politically correct in terms of recommending what's out there and what might be practical in terms of the solutions oriented approach. Mark, do you have any early comments on that?
Yeah, thank you. So I think this question about a primer on risk modeling is something that not just we as staff, but other of our colleagues in energy safety have been thinking about as well. So the topic of the risk models is gets really involved really quickly. And I know Sean had to go through this when he started with us a year and a half ago of trying to take what was in the WMPs, trying to take some of the theory, talking with the utilities, figuring out what the pieces were and how they all fit together. And is there a way that we can avoid making the next person, whoever that is, go through the same, quite involved process, maybe without the same resources. So within the Energy Safety Policy Division, there's an internal training effort. And one of those elements is, can we write down some of those things that we now all know about how risk modeling works? The other is that there's the risk model working group, which has been going on for about 5 years now. And that's a collaborative exchange between energy safety, utility risk models, and stakeholders, including some of the modelers themselves. And later this year, they're planning to publish an approaches document that explains how the utilities have taken on some of the particular elements and challenges of the risk models. So I think there are a couple of efforts underway that I think will get at the question that you're asking. But it is something that people are challenged by, but also aware of.
That's the perfect question, which is, how does risk modeling happen? And how does the board think risk modeling should happen? And the answer is, how does it happen? It happens in a bunch of different ways. It happens uniquely to each utility. And then how do we think it should be different? Well, we've been asking all this time, can you please explain very clearly how you're doing the things you're describing in the WMPs? And they're getting better and better at describing it while also learning and evolving our process as they understand it and report it clearly. So yeah, and then what Mark is emphasizing is that that's so complicated in its own, but each utility does it its own way. And maybe a best practice, even this is actually something we recommended, was that best practices could be regionally specific. And so it's really complicated and very difficult. So we've also then tried to respond to the request. Did the utilities account for these extreme conditions appropriately in the risk models? And one of, in a nuanced way, we respond by saying, well, that may not be quite the question to ask. And so, in the end, we're trying to help build clarity between the regulatory body and the utilities while also running through different competition. And also finding out what other tools are out there that might be beneficial as opportunities for the utilities as well. So, yeah, we continue to try to understand it clearly. And then what I think I hear is maybe a brief overview, a clear brief overview might be warranted, like in a 5-minute update in the next quarterly. The board understands it.
Good.
Okay. Any other comments from board members? All right. Shall I take public comment before the vote?
Chair, if I could just say, in response to Board Member Haynes's comment, what I'd propose is that we can add a citation. So the recommendation number 1 that says energy safety should implement our last recommendations. We can just add a citation to those last recommendations, and then that will go to a link that people can click on to find them. So nobody else has to do the digging that Board Member Haynes did. So I think if we could add that to the board resolution, that would be a simple solution to that.
Sounds good.
So then, yes, I think public comment would be appropriate.
In the room. Any, is there any public comment on Teams, on the phone, or by email?
No public comments at this time.
Moved.
Second.
It's moved and seconded that the Wildfire Safety Advisory Board approves the consideration of extremes and utility risk models report as presented. With the minor amendment that we add a reference to our 2025 recommendations in the document. Mark, will you take it over?
Board Member Armstrong.
Aye.
Board Member Armstrong, aye. Board Member Batcher.
Aye. Aye.
Board Member Batcher, aye. Chair Block.
Aye.
Chair Block, aye. Board Member Haynes.
Aye.
Board Member Haynes, aye. Board Member Mater.
Aye.
Board Member Mater, aye. Vice Chair Porter.
Aye.
Vice Chair Porter, aye. Chair, you have 6 votes for the motion, none against and no abstentions.
Thank you all for your consideration on the paper. Thank you very much, Sean, for your incredibly hard work and guiding the board, including and especially the risk model committee towards clarity and structure to that report. It was hugely helpful. So the ayes have it and the motion is adopted. The Wildfire Safety Advisory Board approves the final staff draft considerations of extremes and utility risk models as presented. Next on the agenda, we'll hear an update from the POU committee on its recent work and discussion with POUs and club.
Thank you, Board. Chair Block. Board Member Mater and I sit on the POU co-op committee, who interacts with the POU co-op working group, represented by the joint associations and CMUA, and a number of larger POUs like SMUD and LADWP. Since the year started in 2026, the Wildfire Safety Advisory Board and the POU co-op working group have met 5 times. We do it once monthly. And we've discussed many topics over those months, those being risk tools, situation awareness, POU and co-op input to the SB 254 report compiled by the California Earthquake Authority, protective equipment and device settings, PEDs, the SB 254 report that was published, we discussed, independent evaluator report frequency, i.e. Reports accompanying WMP comprehensive updates, alternate letter approach for utilities that don't have overhead facilities in the high fire threat district. The U.S. Forestry Service reorganization. Also our focus areas that we talked about at previous board meetings, and topics from the Pacific Northwest National Laboratory Report on best practices for utility wildfire mitigation. So what we're going to do now is report out more in depth on a number of areas that we discussed and to update the public and the full board, as there was a request really to better socialize what the POU committee has been working on. So one of the areas were focus areas, and as was in last year's advisory opinion, the purpose of the focus areas are to provide resources to utilities and to indicate the ways that the Wildfire Safety Advisory Board may look at the maturation level of future WMPs. Our goal there was to be helpful and transparent. However, we've heard some communication that utilities are becoming myopic and focusing solely on those focus areas and paying less attention to their overall WMP submittals and the areas that they are required by statute to address. So that was not our intent. Utilities should be focused on the entire plan. It is a method by which we examine the level of maturity in addressing their plans. And being transparent by communicating exactly what we're focused on and looking more deeply into. We will review and provide advice on whole plans, not just the focus areas. So hopefully for those focus areas, we have published something utilities can use. And, but of course, are not only the source of what we're looking at. We'll have a discussion on future focus areas later, I think, in the agenda. But did ask the POUs for their input for future topics. They said that was most helpful to them were examining metrics, grid design, grid hardening, and inspections. And so we invite them to weigh in on future agendas. The second more in-depth thing that we discussed was POU representation also asked about the alternative letter approach for utilities who have no overhead facilities in the HFTD. In our 2024 advisory opinion, we provided an alternate to the annual plan of new plans every 3 years and an annual letter saying any updates, giving us input on whether there were any updates. Since that's the schedule we adopted earlier this year, puts those utilities on an every 4-year cycle, we feel that the alternate letter approach has been superseded. And so I would ask right now if the board has any feedback on that. So,
Well, one comment I just wanted to make is when you were describing our approach and communications with the POUs.
Yeah.
I don't think that we were saying that they had become myopic, but that we were saying that because we were focusing, we had identified some focus areas that we wanted to pour special attention to. Didn't mean that we weren't looking at all the areas statutorily required by law.
Yeah.
Right? And that we obviously expected still we were going to do all of that examination of the mitigation plans, but that we have identified some areas that there is potential area for growth. And so we wanted to pay special attention to those particular areas and draw their attention to that.
Perhaps you can remind me, what is the objective that we're trying to achieve by focus areas?
So, Tim, I would remember. I think maybe if we looked at last year's focus areas, and in light of the Palisades fire and the uncertainty about the cause of the Palisades fire, we adopted a focus area, situational awareness and the ability to initiate a public safety power shutdown as a particular area to focus in on. In light that, there were many of the wildfire mitigation plans that said, yes, all of the switching centers are empowered to do so, but they didn't have a specific explanation of how they go through the process of determining the risks and when to initiate those. They didn't go, the plan didn't go into the details. And we wanted to communicate that we were going to be looking for those type of details, especially for utilities with overhead facilities in the high fire threat district area. And so that was that last year. This year, we wanted to add some different focus. And so we were using the same model that we used last year.
and it's also a method by which we can, so being more focused in 1 or 2 areas, having those discussions with them, it allows us to gauge the maturity of each and every plan. But focusing only in a narrower scope looking at how they're moving forward, how they're reporting to us what they've done, how it's reduced the risk profile, and what they're intending to do next. The entire plan is still important, but it allows us to focus a little bit more acutely on certain areas, which we do discuss with them. It builds, again, our maturity in examining the WMPs, and helping them move along in the same vein. But we don't want, oh, sorry, go ahead.
See, and I'm not sure whether or not this discussion is best in this agenda item or in the following that is on the focus areas. But if I when I think about the responsibilities of the Wildfire Safety Advisory Board, what we're to do is evaluate the effectiveness of wildfire management plans by publicly owned utilities in order to be able to identify and to mitigate their risk of causing a wildfire. And so when I think in terms of a focus area, then it's that what I'm thinking of is let me see, the ability to be able to focus on particular areas with the expectation that it's going to lead to improvements in both the identification and the mitigation. And so, when I reflect on what it is that we had approved in our recommendations for last year, it was a situational awareness and it was PSPS. And I understand, I support the recommendation that we had made last year. But at the same time, what happens is that I reflect on the conversation that we have had this morning with Ready Electric and the years that they put in to being able to putting themselves in a position in order to be able to improve their situational awareness. And so, when I reflect on, it was in December that we made a recommendation that there be these improvements in the wildfire management plan in these two areas, and recognizing that the POUs are going to require years in order to be able to put those into effect. I'm wondering whether or not it's efficient for us to now reflect on what are the new focus areas that we would want the POUs to approve on as their wildfire management plans are maturing, without the ability to, number one, assess whether or not these past recommendations had, in effect, improved on their ability to identify risk and to mitigate it. And so that's what I get tripped up by, is that we can move quickly from, one focus area to another focus area, but it takes, as you know from work that you've done in your career, it takes a much longer period of time and actually to put these changes into effect. They're still working their way through their systems in order to be able to achieve the objectives that we had had with situational awareness. And what we heard from Reading this morning is that they're just about ready. You know, they haven't triggered a PSPS yet, and they're looking for the type of feedback that they will actually use in order to be able to improve on the process. And so I just don't know. We don't have feedback right now. And so help me understand what is to be gained by us spending time about a discussion about focus areas when we realize that what we put in place is still a process.
But even then, I think that what we're looking for, even if it's a whiteboard exercise where there didn't exist, where one didn't exist, that is maturity. And getting the POUs to communicate that that's where they're at and that we intend to in the next few years, utilizing our visit this morning with Reading, they had a delineated plan 2026, 2027, 2028. It gave us expectations that they listened to the focus points, however, didn't abandon the rest of their WMP obligation. It's integrated. And I think the focus areas allow us to look, set a low bar, and I'm just using that as an example, that they can step over to start to show us the maturity that, again, should never stop. And it should never be an exercise of whether or not the 7 of us are satisfied. Hey, you're a good utility, but knowing that this is an ever evolving enemy. Wildfire is real in this state, and it affects especially the way the obligation of taking on full accountability for any ignition, whether or not they operated prudently or not. I think the focus areas allow us to let them know what we're looking at things that will show their maturity as they move along. We're not looking for them to initialize right away. And matter of fact, that isn't even the discussion that we're having, correct?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So we put the.
Yeah.
Well, we can move to the focus area discussion. Next, perhaps I do have a short presentation or a board member report. I don't know if your remarks are done on the POU report out. Or if other board members wanted to weigh in, certainly don't mean to interrupt a discussion.
No, I had one issue of, again, that there was a discussion from the POU representatives from the joint associations about independent evaluators. We had discussed that at our last board meeting. And what we did say is the WSAB does not expect to review independent evaluator reports no more than every 4 years. However, there was a little pushback during the discussion, but pretty much we communicated that every other 4 years would be a reasonable request. Anything 8 to 12 years would be too long. So our recommendation would still be every 4 years. And I do want to move on to the focus areas.
Is there any public comment?
Any public comment in the room? Any public comment on Teams, on the phone, or by email?
No public comment at this time.
Your areas of focus for reviewing WSAB.
Yeah, thank you. I do have a short presentation to frame it and really appreciate the board feedback. That's the purpose of this item, is to get board discussion and board input. So next slide, please, Unique. In last year's advisory opinion, the board adopted, there were two purposes listed for the focus areas, and I think Board Vice Chair Porter referred to these in the beginning of his remarks earlier today as well. One of them is to provide resources to utilities, and that is the focus areas as they're written are summaries of information that are, we've been referring to it as the maturity ladder, but these are some of the steps that a utility can take as it matures. Starting with the things that are easiest to do based on public information, low capital cost, low time of implementation, and then moving on to things that might require more planning, more capital, more staff resources to understand and implement. And then the second is, Board Member Porter is also saying this is intended just to provide some transparency to the POUs and co-ops as they implement their plans. Instead of the bring me another rock phenomenon, what is it that what questions is the board and is the board staff going to be asking as it reviews the WMP? So, for example, in risk identification, which was one of the topics last year, the first question might be, have you looked at the, what do you see when you look at the free maps? So there's the high fire threat district map, there's the high fire severity zone maps that CAL FIRE does. Have you mapped your infrastructure onto those? And then does that help you with identifying where the riskiest areas are? And then from there, you go on to prioritization. Then there are additional steps that you can take. So there are other resources out there, some of them free, some of them at cost. There are ways that those can be integrated into decision making. So again, starting with the thinking about maturity as a ladder, not that any wildfire mitigation plan is perfect, but that it can be, each one builds on the previous one. So as I said, those were the two purposes that the board endorsed in its adoption of the advisory opinion last year. As I mentioned, next slide, please. We've done last year, and I think we've discussed about this, risk identification and preemptive de-energization. And staff have been working on protective equipment and device settings and situational awareness. Next slide, please. We asked the board and invited the board in March to provide discussion and input on what the next focus areas would be. And the board asked us for one additional detail on what those focus areas meant, what they included, and then also consultation with the publicly owned utilities and cooperatives. So next slide, please. And I apologize if I'm going too quickly. I want to make sure that there's time for the board discussion. In your packet for this meeting was an outline of the focus areas. They included the ones that we have worked on so far. So that's risk ID and preemptive de-energization. The current focus areas, protective equipment and device settings, which goes by number of names. So PG&E calls it enhanced power line safety settings, or EPSS. The Southern California utilities call it fast trip or fast curve. Others have other names for it. Situational awareness is weather and fuels, forecasts and data, and grid monitoring, wildfire detection. So those are the ones that we have either published something on or started to work on, and we plan to bring those to the board in September as a written product for board review, comment, and potentially adoption. As we wrap those up, we're interested in board input on future focus areas. What would be the highest priority? And that, the categories that we've outlined here, and these are drawn from things like the maturity model, from the PNNL report that board member Porter referred to earlier, from the WMP guidelines for investor-owned utilities. Not to say that these are structured guidelines, but that these are the categories that people generally talk about when talking about WMPs. And the borders between them can be a little bit gray as well. So some topics may fit one or more categories. This was a way to outline how we saw the breakdown. Some potential future topics would include inspections, so asset inspection cycles beyond GO 95 and 165. Things like new technologies, drone inspections are being have really accelerated in use over the past just 2 or 3 years. Asset inspection effectiveness, so QA/QC, how you look at that. So inspections would be one category. Asset management and data is another. So what does the database of assets look like for a utility? How is it maintained? What does it include? How are conditions monitored, and how are assets maintained in terms of, is it a run to failure model? Is it site replacement on a schedule? Is it some sort of life cycle modeling for how hard an asset has worked, so to speak, in order to determine what that replacement schedule or maintenance schedule looks like? Perhaps the largest category in here would be grid design and hardening. So these are all of the elements like replacing expulsion fuses and lightning arresters, all the way through covered conduct and underground. And there is a lot of information on each of these. These are where a lot of the capital investments come in. So both the CPUC and Energy Safety have asked the investor-owned utilities for information on effectiveness and costs, and we would be collecting a lot of that to provide it as a resource. Another category would be emergency preparedness and community outreach. So engagement with communities on wildfire mitigation plans, and then also emergency communications to them in the case of a preemptive de-energization or a fire caused somewhere else. Plan metrics and modeling is a requirement in the statute for how the plans are reviewed. Includes results and lessons learned, what metrics are used, processes for continuous improvement. And so Board Member Haynes, I think this gets a little bit at your question as well about how, if we have a focus area this year, somebody incorporates it into their plan, when is the point at which that is then reviewed, reconsidered, and when do we expect to see, on what length of time, or do we expect to see any change in the plan or in the activities that the utility is taking on? Vegetation management, of course, is a category the board has weighed in on a number of ways. Wildfire response and consequence reduction is a category. So field response, things like water tanks in the back of trucks. We have talked with at least a couple of utilities that are putting in helicopter dip tanks. So ANZA co-op that we visited in March is one of those. City of Reading, where we are now, funds some wildfire response positions in its city fire department, specifically to assist with the potential that to try to reduce the consequence if there is a utility caused wildfire. And then the last of these is decision making, which is a slightly broader category, but in my thought, it would come sort of at the end of this. But once you have your risk identification, once you have identified the options that might work for your system and their costs, how do you balance risk evaluation, prioritization, mitigation selection, and taking lessons learned here from experience, where we can find it both within the publicly owned utilities and cooperatives, also from the IOUs and other publications. Many utilities across the West are dealing with this, and there's research on it as well. So those are the main categories, and that was where we intended primarily to ask for direction on which of those would be the highest priority. Where do we get the most bang for our buck, for our staff buck, in meeting those purposes of providing resources to utilities, as was published in the advisory opinion last year, and also credit to Sean, who is the lead author on those. Those were pretty heavily cited sections, and so if there's a comment in the preemptive de-energization on resource centers, for example, I believe there's a citation to ways that utilities have constructed resource centers or have thought about resource centers. And then the other is what questions we as staff in particular, but of course the board as well, might ask of utilities. And so this is in service of that has been a really constructive exercise for staff in building up expertise in some of these categories on wildfire mitigation. So I'm sure that I left most of those questions open rather than answering them. but that was sort of how the staff has been thinking about these items. Up to you, Chair.
Are there any comments from board members?
Yes. Chairperson Black. I think this stems from an earlier exercise that our committee did with the staff of talking about what we want to see in a wildfire mitigation plan. And then we were ranking which kind of priority. Eventually, we'd like to see a wildfire mitigation plan that addresses all of these areas. Like it would be wonderful if like we felt comfortable that we have done our duty to the people of California by helping POUs to get to a point where they can, even small. I mean, there's great mitigation plans out there, SMUD, Ready, TID, there's tons of organizations that have great plans out there, but we want to see eventually all mitigation plans be able to, in some way, to the capacity that they can, cover all of these areas. And so when the Palisades fire happened, we really identified quickly the two most important that we really felt the responsibility that we had. We felt the responsibility to focus on those plans. And yes, we fully intend to, I think this body should follow up and see the changes that are made. I guess the exercise now is that we're looking at from the list we made up of our dream mitigation plan, like what would we like to, is there an area that we would like to focus in on in the future as we as we look towards these mitigation plans? And I think Vice Chair Porter says the maturity model, but like to bring a forum to say everybody addresses at least this. And that's I think the exercise that we're looking at.
Any other comments? Or I solicit comments on what to be focused on.
Actually, let me, if you don't mind, I'd like to try and articulate the thoughts. First off, I believe that, you aspire to excellence and you achieve mediocrity. So I think that it's incumbent upon us to try and find out what we can do in order to be able to work with publicly owned utilities in order to be able to identify the areas that can be improved upon. And but I also think that what we need to recognize is that there's a vast array of areas that we could focus on, but again, I am interested as we continue this discussion to be able to really understand, do we have any feedback that we can point to from past recommendations? And it doesn't just have to be focus areas. I think that we've got a good record to point to that has been accomplished over the 7 years that this board has been in place. That gives us confidence that we can do effective guidance to achieve improvements. We need to look no further than where it is that we started and where it is that we are. And and one of the things that this board did before I ever arrived was to be able to get a standard wildfire management plan that is being provided by all of the POUs. That's a major accomplishment. And so it's put us in a position to be able to now start looking at things in a more granular way, a standard way of and areas where we can see some improvement. So I think it's really, we've got a lot of success that we can draw on in order to be able to say that there are things that we can do and build on in order to be able to achieve improvements. But I'd like to be able to have us step back a little bit in order to be able to really identify those things programmatically and then structurally in terms of the wildfire management plans. I'd also like to be able to include in the conversation our ability to be able to demonstrate that that these changes have led to improvement in risk identification and risk mitigation. And then I think that it would be helpful for me as we go through this conversation in order to be able to have some criteria that we could point to in order to be able to say that we've got these 20 things that are in front of us that we could be focusing on along with the POUs. But this criteria leads us to these 2 or 3 that we're going to focus on next. And so it seems to me as though maybe this is not going to be effective for other board members. But as I try and process my way through something like this, I'm looking for answers for what it is that we've done in the past, achieving objectives that we've set for ourselves, and criteria that we can use in order to be able to guide our future decisions. So, the starting point is aspire to excellence and achieve mediocrity. I completely understand that. And that's in effect what we're going to be trying to achieve as we ensure as a board and with the publicly owned utilities on their wildfire management plans. So those are my thoughts.
I may say, I appreciate your perspective. I mean, when I review mitigation plans, when I look at the POUs and their various resources and abilities, I think the first thing that I'd look for is like, what are the minimum standards, which is the situational awareness, right? We have to have, like, the environment has changed. You just can't have an answering service situation anymore. You have to have situational awareness for if you're going to operate overhead electric utility in the high fire threat district area. And then I look towards, spark reduction, and the most benefit for the least amount of resources first. I think that's when I look to review a mitigation plans, such as, expulsion fuses, the lightning arresters, coordinated equipment, stuff, fault equipment that's rated for the fault duty. Those are like the lowest hanging fruit. And that's the first thing I think that should be our guidance when we're looking for like at an overall guidance for these mitigation plans.
I'm going to say that I think maybe I'm open to, we might have to kind of reframe what it is that we're trying to do here. Our intent, actually, in communicating our intent with the focus areas.
We can't talk to you unless we're here, Tim. So, I appreciate your perspective.
So
this is our opportunity.
Yeah, I know that's what. Yeah. So I mean, I get it. Our mandate is to work with the POUs, find out what can be, right, in the sense of what's deliverable. We've got past recommendations. We got we have 7 years worth of them. Or almost 7 years worth of them. And I wrote this, and then finding out what's possible for them. But we have to, in that equation, move them beyond where they're comfortable. And it doesn't mean put a burden on them, but if there are a small group that are comfortable with the status quo. We have to, as a board, have to admit that. And we want to move them. The high performers, they may never get there. They may not have the resources, the customer rate base in order to do so. And I think that the board and staff consider that. But I think we have to set the minimum where we want them to be, all of them. And maybe phrasing it as focus areas may be a bit difficult. It's not being accepted universally. And so it has been misinterpreted. So like I said, I'm open to maybe we need to reframe it.
Well, I don't think it's just words. I hope it's not just words instead of reacting to it. And so, when I reflect back on the presentation of the ESB 254 study that Mr. Welch had provided to us, one of the starting points that he had is the state needs to come to the realization that protecting the community really begins at the community level. And I buy into that. I think that is valid and a valid way for us to be able to look at our effectiveness here. And so for me, it's looking back to the publicly owned utilities and making sure that as we're going through this focus area and trying to find ways to help mature the wildfire management plan, that we're as well aligned to them as what we possibly can be. And recognize that we are not going to be in lockstep, and that and as a result, we're going to be pressing in ways that they're uneasy with, and probably we're not equipped to be able to fully measure ourselves in order to be able to ascertain whether or not we're pushing the right button and we're achieving the type of outcome. But I'm not close enough to the discussions that the POU committee is having with the POUs to right now feel as though I have confidence that if I were to say, yep, it's these three focus areas that we focus on, and it's going to achieve the reduction in risk and the increase in our mitigation. And so I'm looking for an approach that is going to be able to give me a higher sense of confidence that when we go through this, next iteration of the maturation of the wildfire management plans, that we've got something that has we can reasonably expect is going to achieve the improvements that we're looking for. So, and so again, I don't think, I'm not troubled by us calling this a focus area. I'm not troubled at all by us, characterizing this as looking for maturity of the wildfire management plan. interested in risk reduction and mitigation. And I want to be able to have confidence that when we, you know, when we come back to the board and ask for approval of another recommendation, that we have done our due diligence in order to be able to have confidence that these are the right focus areas for us to adopt.
I hear what you're saying. I really do. And I think we should be also inviting as a POU committee, representatives from each individual. Yeah, each individual, public utility and co-op to our working, group, meeting. Now, mind you, it would probably be 275 people on that call. We just have one or two. No.
Dictate how
No.
the committee
Yeah,
does
yeah.
its business. Just as a board member and wanting to be able to give fair and open consideration for the recommendations. What I was thinking is, have at our next quarterly meeting, have this conversation and bring in the publicly owned utilities in order to be able to kick it around and to, I think, recognize that our expectation is maturity. Our expectation is that POUs that some POUs need to pick their game up. And we have examples that we can point to that show that this can be done, and that we have patience, but it is also can be exhausting. So for me, set up a discussion at the next meeting of the board in order to be able to discuss what it is that we're thinking in terms of the focus areas that we want to adopt.
Thank you, Tim. Mark.
Well, if I may, here, board member is that, I understand, I think your point, which I'm paraphrasing, which is if you focus on everything, you focus on nothing.
Yeah.
Right, in essence. And so I understand that. I don't think this was an exercise meant to do that.
No.
But your point is well taken.
For me, I'm comfortable in just asking the POU committee to work with staff. If you're comfortable with that direction, toss some ideas in following meeting for you all So the camera overheated. His battery just wore out.
Yeah, the backlight. But not bad.
You're good?
Yeah, we're good.
No, red light. Okay. All right, so I'll take public comment and put up the agenda item, correct?
Yes,
Okay, any public comments? Unique, is there any public comment, on Teams, on the phone, or by email?
No public comment.
No
at this-
public
oh,
comment at this,
looks like we have someone with a hand
someone
raised.
with a hand raised.
Susie Berlin, if you want to go ahead.
Great, thank you very much. Hi, yeah, this is Susie Berlin, and I don't necessarily have public comment as much as there was no audio for the last few minutes. So whatever was said in wrapping up the discussion, if someone could reiterate it or summarize it, that would be very helpful.
Yeah, we did pause for a few minutes, but let's just conclude the action items to be wrapping up the conversation around the next steps. So Chris.
Yeah, so what we're going to do is hold off on comment and polling the board members on what focus areas they would like for us to focus on. We're going to go back and the POU committee is going to talk with staff to see how we bring a number of the POUs together at our next board meeting. And have a open air discussion about focus areas, what those means. Well, what that means and our approach moving forward.
Thank you for that. Thank you for that.
Susie, and thank you for being here.
Looks like we have another hand raised.
Another hand raised.
Josh Stoops, you should be
Josh
able to
Stoops, you
unmute.
should be able to unmute.
Sure. Sure. Good afternoon, Josh Stoops. I'm State Regulatory Affairs at the Sacramento Municipal Utility District. We just wanted to express our support for the board's approach to the development and selection of the focus areas. As was referenced earlier, we do understand that these are areas for special attention and not meant to exclude the evaluation of other important factors in our WMPs. We really think the past and current topics were appropriate areas of focus, and appreciate staff sharing the future topics. And, we're still evaluating those topics now at this time, but, look forward to continued discussions with the board and staff, at either our ongoing POU and board collaborative meetings or I did hear toward the end there that there may be a future board meeting, but support that continued collaboration. Thank you for the opportunity to comment. Appreciate the time.
Okay. I'll move on to the next agenda item, the staff update. Mark, would you please read the staff update?
yes, thank you very much. Next slide, please. So, might be, looks like we might be missing some bullet points, but so give you a quick update on our work streams and the work that we've done since the last board meeting. One is wildfire mitigation plan collaboration and review. So as was in the schedule the board adopted for WMP review, there's a period this spring and early summer for what we're calling early collaborative exchanges, a chance to make sure that we're meeting the board's strategic priority of greater understanding and context for each of the POUs by inviting them to conversations before their WMPs come in on the issues that they're tackling, any support that board staff can offer. And we have been doing that. We've met with 12 of the 13 utilities designated for this period so far, still reaching out to the 13th and hoping to do that. I would say that our conversations have generally been very friendly and collaborative. It's been a very good experience for us as board staff to gain more of that context and knowledge, and that we'll be able to bring to the board and to the staff draft of the WMP review, and also to build some of those relationships and understand what the constraints and practices are out there. So we want to express our gratitude for those who've taken the time to meet with us and our openness to continue to do that. For focus area summaries, as I mentioned, we're wrapping up PEDS and situational awareness now and intend to bring those to the September board meeting. I think sounds like there might be a conversation with the POU committee before we get to that. So we'll look for what the conversation in September does look like based on that. We have an outstanding request for advice from Energy Safety on vegetation management. We're still working with them. They plan to have a product in the next couple of months for board review, and then we will ask individual board members to assist with that and see if there's anything that needs to be adopted by the full board or if this is turning into more of an informal collaboration like the ones that Chair Block described in terms of helping with the guidelines. So that is still underway, but no major developments to report this time. The board staff held the first ever, as far as I know, staff workshop on utility risk tools on May 13th, bringing together, we had about 60 folks on the call. We had presentations from Pacific Northwest National Laboratory, and then representatives from Golden State Power Cooperative, Anaheim Public Utilities, and Truckee Donner Public Utility District on the work they are doing on risk tools, which includes risk identification as well as situational awareness, and then also some of the things that they and other POUs and co-ops might be looking for in risk tools. We did have in the audience a number of companies that are working on tools that they think may be attractive to POUs and understanding what those needs and opportunities are, I think was an opportunity for dialogue. So we wanted to thank our presenters for taking the time to do that and thank all participants. We also did have board members in attendance, although none spoke, and wanted to see if any of them wanted to provide any additional perspective on that workshop.
The presenters that you had, the topics that were reviewed, and the engagement that it engendered were all very helpful. And so I know I benefited from it, and I'm assuming there's others that were in attendance did as well. So thank you for arranging that and the work that you put in to pull it off.
Thank you. And Sean was the lead on that, so I want to make sure that he gets the credit for it.
I enjoyed the fact that those who didn't have risk tools available to them, of the POUs that presented, built from the ground up what they thought ultimately they needed in the beginning and have constantly evolved those tools. So it never would have understood that was possible without that workshop. So thank you.
Great, thank you. I'll mention very quickly the strategic planning. So as we discussed at the March board meeting, the strategic plan was adopted for 2024 through 2027. So starting in the second half of this year, which is now less than a month away, I'll be working with the strategic planning committee to develop a process for the development of the next strategic plan. So to our strategic planning committee members, that's coming. And we will bring at least a work stream update to the September board meeting. I think that's one question too. Should we try to, one of the first places I thought was we brought in a consultant for the first and second board discussions. Should we consider a consultant this time around or facilitator for that discussion? My thinking is we'll also want to do a similar assessment of where we've been, where we are, where we want to go. But I think fleshing that all out, really look forward to working with you, Board Member Haynes. And Board Member Batcher on the phone is the other member of that committee. So I mentioned the next meeting, which is in South Lake Tahoe on September 2nd. We will try to work with utilities on site visits for that, and we'll send out invitations when we have more information. So that concludes. I'm happy to take any questions, but those conclude the items that I wanted to bring up to the staff update. Thank you.
If you have any comments, please speak up. All right, are there any comments in the room? Any comments on Teams, on the phone, or by email?
No public comments at this time.
No public comments at this time.
So this is, do we have any, do any of the board members have any proposed items for the future meeting? I think we have this POU discussion pulled into the next, did we say the next board meeting? We aspire to the next board meeting. I propose, based on the discussion from the risk model committee, that I provide some really concise highlights on what is happening in the grand realm of risk modeling for IOUs and BOUs. I might reach out to my new Reading friends to find out what's the latest in their world with their new consultants. And so, and eager to, I'm also in support of a POU conversation at the board meeting so that I can participate in some of these any other comments from board members? Okay. Any public comments in the room? Any public comments on Teams or by email?
No public comments at this
No
time.
public comments at this time.
Just specifically for matters that are not on the agenda. Any public comments in the room? Any public comments on Teams, on the phone, or by email?
No public comments.
No
at this
public
time.
comments at this time.
Adjourn. Thank you all for participating in this meeting. Conversations. Please don't hesitate to reach out if you want to get a hold of us, or if you'd like some further information. Our board email address is wsab@energysafety.ca.gov. Thank you, Mr. Lee, for helping to make this meeting possible, as well as Unique, Sean, Gifford, and Mark for keeping us contributing constructively to the Office of Energy Infrastructure Safety. As we end, I also want to thank members of the public that attended today's meeting and those who participated during the public comment section. Your efforts will help all California. Thank you all, and we hope to see you on September 2nd. We'll be in Truckee.
South Lake Tahoe.
Board meeting is adjourned, and thanks for participating.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
You're trying.
Yeah.